Hello, friends. It is Thursday, December 26th. I hope everybody had a Merry Christmas. I'm Jeff Nodell, and today we're going to talk about oil spill risk and oil spill prevention, hopefully. Our guest today is Lovel Pratt, well known in the San Juans. You are with the Friends of the San Juans. You are the Marine Protection and Policy Director. Thanks for joining us, Lovel.
Well, thank you very much, Jeff. Good to be here with you today.
All right. And first, I want to talk about, I want to do a little fundraising for CNL2 Media, SanJuans.Today. We have a wonderful matching grant from the Mary C. Foundation. This was arranged by Maureen C., and she persuaded the foundation to put up $10,000, up to $10,000 to match. And so far we've taken in about $7,000. That was matched, so we're up to almost $14,000. As you can see, we only need $3,000 more to take full advantage of this drive. CNL2 Media is a 501c3 nonprofit, which means for many people it's tax deductible. So we have 5 days left, and even if it's a $25 donation turns into 50 and 100 turns into 200. So anything you can do would be very helpful. Certainly you can donate after the first, but this is the season where many people decide that they need a deduction. So think of us if you want to do that. So thank you. Okay, Lovel, let's get to business here. I decided to ask to do this interview because the outgoing Governor Jay Inslee, was persuaded by people in the San Juans, I think particularly, to write a letter to the Canadian government. Why don't you describe what recently happened?
Yes. Well, I was watching the governor's budget rollout last week, and reporter Tom Bonsi asked a question about whether there was state support for an emergency response towing vessel in the Central Salish Sea in the San Juan Islands. And the governor responded that there was nothing in the budget to address that, but that he was supportive of this, and he'd been talking to his counterparts in British Columbia and in the federal government in advocating for an emergency response towing vessel that Canada should and would provide in the Haro Strait and Boundary Pass region. So that was really exciting to see. And then the governor also sent out a letter, and this was sent out on December 19th or 20th to the Consulate General of Canada, and also expressing the need for an emergency response towing vessel and the appropriateness of Canada providing that oil spill prevention resource in Haro Strait and Boundary Pass. So I'm just thrilled with the governor's advocacy for this oil spill prevention asset that we really need and have needed for quite some time.
So describe how that rescue boat, that tugboat, would impact or mitigate a potential oil spill.
Yeah. So an emergency response towing vessel responds to vessels in distress. So if there's a vessel that has lost steerage or propulsion and is at risk of going aground and potentially, getting into an accident and causing an oil spill, the emergency response towing vessel is prepared to go to that vessel in distress and prevent it from having an accident and an oil spill. So it's a really significant and important resource to have for vessels that don't have their own tug escorts. And so all the container ships, cargo ships, the only vessels that do have their own tug escorts are tankers when they're laden. So when they're full of oil cargo, they do have tug escorts if they're over 40,000 deadweight tons in most areas. But otherwise, most of the vessel traffic transiting Haro Strait and Boundary Pass that are going to and from ports in Canada, they don't have tug escorts, and they're at risk of accidents and oil spills should something go wrong. which often does, or which does on occasion, yes.
So in March of this year, the Francis Scott Key Bridge was knocked down. I believe a lack or not enough tugboats or a lack of tugboats was a factor in that bridge being knocked down. Is that true? That's what I heard. That's what I think I read. My point is whether that's true or not. My point is that sometimes ships lose power, and a tugboat in this case that we're talking about, this theoretical case, could make the difference between whether that thing goes astray and hits the rocks, right, or hits something else. I believe in this past week, I think it was a Russian ship, and I can't remember, two ships of a freighter and a tanker collided. It did not create an oil spill. I don't have my facts on that, sorry, but ships lose power. Ships collide, stuff happens. And so the purpose of this emergency tugboat would be to be in position and staffed, right, to jump into action, as opposed to having to come down from Vancouver or up from, are there tugboats stationed in Victoria?
So there's an emergency response towing vessel stationed at Neah Bay. So that's near the entrance to the Strait of Juan de Fuca. And that's been a very successful oil spill prevention asset that's responded to numerous vessels in distress and prevented accidents and oil spills from occurring. And that vessel, because of its position at Neah Bay, it would not be able to arrive in time if there were a vessel in distress in Boundary Pass and Haro Strait. It's too far away to arrive in a timely manner. So that's why we need an additional emergency response towing vessel station in Haro Strait and Boundary Pass. And you're correct. An emergency response towing vessel would be on call 24/7, 365 days a year, available to respond to a vessel in distress.
Has the Canadian government taken a position on this in the past or recently? Do you think that they'll say yes to this?
I don't know if there's been a response or what the response would be to Governor Inslee's letter. Hopefully it will be positive. There are emergency response towing vessels that Canada has that are stationed on the outer coast. They would, one option would be to reposition one of those in Haro Strait and Boundary Pass, potentially at Sydney, British Columbia. But whatever they decide, and I just want to also state that the emergency response towing vessel that's stationed at Neah Bay, that's paid for by ships that call on ports in Washington State. So that emergency response towing vessel will respond to any vessel in distress, even if it's going to or from Canada. Once it's responding to a vessel, that vessel pays for its services. But the fact that it's there 24/7, 365, that's paid for by ships going to Washington State ports. So that's another reason why it really makes sense for Canada to provide this essential oil spill prevention asset in Haro Strait and Boundary Pass.
So here's the scary part, and I'm going to ask you to paint a picture of just how bad an oil spill could be if it was anywhere near us in the San Juans. What does it do to the whales? What does it do to the wildlife? What does it do to our shores? And go ahead and paint the picture, because I think it's really important that we understand the risk and what you're doing all day to try to prevent it.
Yeah, Jeff, a major oil spill would be absolutely devastating to this region. And I think that to really understand the impacts that would be caused by a major spill, I urge you to talk to people who have lived through the Exxon Valdez spill in Alaska. And there's some people living here I can put you in touch with, but it would just be horrific in terms of the damages, economic damages, environmental damages, cultural damages, would be huge. And, if you look at, oil spill response, what would be termed a successful, quote unquote, oil spill response would be recovering about maybe 15 to 20% of the spilled oil. So, this oil spill, I mean, a major oil spill would be incredibly damaging to the entire region. It's hard to fathom it. And it's impactful over a long period of time. And so it's just, yeah, I can't even describe. But one thing I will also say is that oil spill prevention is incredibly critical for protecting the endangered southern resident killer whales. So it's well known that these whales travel in matrilineal groups, and if they're in the vicinity of a major oil spill, that one event could cause their extinction. There were 2 groups of killer whales up in Alaska during the Exxon Valdez spill, and one of those groups is essentially extinct. There are a few members left living, but there's been no new calves born. And once those few members die, that group will be extinct. And it took decades for the other group to begin to show signs of recovery. But they have shown some signs of recovery, which is good news. But that's just one piece of what would be one reason why it's so important to focus on oil spill prevention.
And we're going to be putting up in the next day or two a recording that we made of Dr. Ricky Ott's presentation, where I learned that there really is no such thing as an oil spill cleanup. That's not really a thing. As you said, 15%. The rest is dispersed. It's absorbed. It's diluted. They don't come in. It's not like the Dawn commercials where they wipe off little birds and everything's okay. So it really is about prevention. Now, at the same time, I'm learning that the volume of tankers and even the size of the tankers is growing. The volume of tanker traffic through the San Juans, through the Haro Strait. Can you talk about that?
Sure. So in Canada, there's in May of this year, the Trans Mountain Pipeline Expansion Project was completed. And that is basically an additional pipeline that'll almost triple the export of Canadian tar sands crude oil, the diluted bitumen or dilbit crude oil from Canada. And this project was originally proposed as being a means to increase exports to Asia. And the long involved permitting and environmental review process focused on a vessel traffic route that went from the Westridge terminal that Trans Mountain owns in Burnaby, British Columbia, out through Vancouver, down through Georgia Strait, boundary past Haro Strait, and out the Strait of Juan de Fuca and on to Asia. And there was quite a bit of environmental review done for that particular vessel traffic route. But in fact, since the pipeline expansion project has been completed in May, we're seeing tankers come down through boundary pass Haro Strait and then cross the Strait of Juan de Fuca near Victoria, British Columbia and Port Angeles, Washington, and go directly to refineries in Washington State and anchorage areas in Washington State. And so this is an increase in tanker traffic that's importing this really concerning product, diluted bitumen. So bitumen is the oil sands that are mined in Canada. It's basically oily sand. And to get it to flow through a pipeline and be able to be loaded onto a ship, they mix it with diluent, this very high-end and volatile light oil product that they mix the two together. But if there's a spill, there's concern. There's really still no clear information about how a spill will behave in the marine environment. And there's concern that the two products could separate. The bitumen is very heavy. It would sink. The diluent is light. It could volatilize. So a lot of concerns for the environment, for the oil spill responders. It's just very concerning, this product. Different from other crude oils.
Has there ever been a major oil spill of this kind of product with the bitumen?
Well, probably the one that people have heard about is the spill that took place in the Kalamazoo River. And this was a spill that was incredibly costly in terms of the response costs and the restoration costs. And but it was, it was in a river, so fresh water. So there hasn't been a major spill of this product in the marine environment. So that's why there's uncertainty about how it would behave.
And I heard another sevenfold increase of another measure of the traffic increase of tankers through our neighborhood. Explain the sevenfold increase.
Well, what I can tell you is in terms of the vessel transits. And so there would be an increase in tanker transits, an increase of 696 tanker transits each year. So that's huge, and we're not seeing that yet. So since the pipeline expansion project was completed in May, what was stated by Trans Mountain is that they would ramp up their exports over time. So we haven't seen the level of potential tanker traffic that we could see in the future.
So we're okay as long as a ship doesn't malfunction, propulsion doesn't go out, ships don't collide, a major storm doesn't throw a ship on the rocks, right? These are all things that could happen, right?
Well, but what I do want to remind you and listeners of is that the increase in traffic, that has impacts in and of itself. So the underwater noise pollution, the increase in underwater noise, it's been clearly documented that impacts the critically endangered southern resident killer whales, for example, and other marine species. So there are impacts from the increase in tanker traffic, even if there are no accidents and oil spills. And there's the increases in the underwater noise, the increased risk of ship strikes, which can cause the death of whales, and yeah.
So it sounds like it's going to get pretty crowded out there. If it isn't crowded enough, it's going to get even more crowded out there. Well, Lovel, thanks for putting all these things on the record. I know many other people in the islands are very well educated on this and have followed very closely. I think I'll put in a call to Cindy Wolf, and I think Cindy's deeply invested in this too, probably has a lot to say. I can say that I'm starting from, behind on this, but I'm going to catch up, and you're going to see SanJuans.Today cover this consistently, persistently. This is, as I see it, just a personal opinion, this is an existential threat to the San Juans. If you think of a Exxon Valdez spill, if you think of the thing outside of Louisiana and Mississippi, forget the name, these major spills, it is just mind-boggling to me to think of how the San Juans would recover. And it's not just the marine life, it's the economy, the tourism. I mean, you think tourists are going to come and see our black oil-soaked shores? It just would affect absolutely everything. And so anyway, thank you for taking some time on your day off, the day after Christmas. I really appreciate it. Thanks for putting this on our radar, you and Ricky Ott. And
thank you so much. I really appreciate you covering this issue, and you're absolutely right. This is, a major oil spill is perhaps the biggest risk to our economy, our environment, our quality of life. So much is at stake. And so everything we can do to advocate for oil spill prevention is well worth it. So thank you so much for covering this.
Well, it's a good time also to point out that if you don't support the Friends of the San Juans, it may be a good time to think about supporting the Friends of the San Juans. They have a bunch of smart people thinking about this stuff all day, not just thinking about it, but taking action, proposing action. So if you're not a supporter of Friends of the San Juans, maybe you should be. So thank you very much. Yeah, thank you, Lovel. Hello to Boyd, and have a great rest of your holidays. And we'll be in touch in 2025 soon. We're going to keep this conversation going.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Okay. Bye. Thank you, folks. Goodbye.